Well, welcome everybody to Mind Science TV. We are so excited today here at the Mind Science Institute because one of our absolute intentions is to bring true international representation about all our work and understanding the mind, the brain, the body, and how all these things interact and our broad mental health. And so today, our special guest is Sherif Darwish from Egypt. Now, Sherif and I met I love these wonderful international stories. Sherif and I met in Lucerne in a conference there on psychotherapy, and in that conference, Sherif was actually attending my lecture on neuroscience and psychosocial genomics, and he came up and spoke to me. And today I am really, really proud and really honored to reverse the tables and make Sherif the center of the story and me the questioner and the one that's curious about what he's doing. We've had a few conversations and we've had a number of emails and talked about different things. He's such an interesting fellow. He's done medicine. He's come through that arena. He's then gone on into psychiatry. He worked for 6 years in one of the hospitals. I have to look, the Mamura Hospital. And he'll have some stories to tell us about all of that. He went on to really find that there was lack in the area that he began to start specializing in, which was addiction and addicted patients. And actually in 2008, he finally set up his own inpatient clinic, which he rather very beautifully and simply titled Recovery. Entirely appropriate. So Sherif is sitting there waiting for his chance, champing at the bit to tell us his stories because I really want him to do so. So please, on behalf of the Mind Science Institute and as our special guest of Mind Science TV, welcome Sherif. How are you?
Richard, I'm very fine, thank you, and I'm very pleased to meet you and talk in the Mind Science Institute. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And what would you like to us to start from?
Yeah, okay. So let me sort of ask questions as we go along, and feel free to, I mean, if you want to ask me a question about something, you're very welcome to do that. Very much a conversation between each other, as we've done a number of times. But I think, I mean, I want to talk about the work you're doing now. I think that's really interesting. But there's that nice background, and I wonder if you can just fill us in for a few minutes on that background of that time in the Mamura Hospital where you were suddenly, thrown into this whole psychiatric aspect, and then just take it through some of those steps that have brought you up to the recovery clinic now.
Well, I started my residency program in Mamura Hospital. This is a very big hospital here in Egypt. It's a 900-bed hospital, all psychiatry patients and addiction. And after a couple of months of working there, they started something called the acute ward. I think it was a crazy idea, but the idea is you get all the excited patients in the same ward, and the ward is about 100 patients. So if you imagine 100 excited patients all at the same time, all in the same place, and you have about 4 residents only, and about another 4 specialists to cover all these 100 patients. So every day we go and we work double the work of everybody, but actually, although it was very hard work, but it gave me very nice experience to deal with excited patients, to deal with acute patients very fast, and you have to be very efficient and to think very well about the drugs and how the patient, you can calm the patient down and start working with them and diagnosing very fast. And this, I think this was a very important step in my career, and it gave me very nice experiences. Maybe some dangerous experiences, some patients. One day we were talking with some fellow from other hospitals. They don't have excited patients. They're forbidden to have excited patients. And he said, I've seen a lot of excited patients, and we can give them some drops and so on. And I told them, did you have ever anyone broken a pipe and come attacking you with a pipe from the wall and come attacking you with a pipe? We had this manic patient, and just he was excited, and he grabbed a pipe from the wall and he pulled it back, and the pipe came out in his hand. But it was very, very nice experiences, I think. And then I started.
I think that's. I'll just jump in there, because that's such an interesting term. I really like it. An excited patients. So elevated patients, those that are just in a state of a different state of relationship with the general experience. You know, I just want to highlight that for our listeners and watchers, because that's such a kind statement. It's such a heartfelt statement, and I think it really speaks a little bit to your general sense of compassion. But I do. Have you ever had an excited patient coming at you with a pipe? Very good, very good. So sorry, please pardon me interrupting. Do go on. So there you are. You've survived the pipe attack. What happens next?
Yeah, some pipe attacks, some knife attacks, and so on. It was a very, very exciting residency. Well, through the residency, I had some rounds in the addiction work, and I was very interested in psychotherapy, and that's why I started psychiatry actually. And there was this patient that we were discharging after some detoxification, and this patient came and said to the specialist, "Well, I'm going out." And he said, "Okay, good luck, but please call me whenever you have an idea to use drugs. Just call me, and we will see through it." And this was very interesting for me. And I said, "Okay." After the patient went, I asked the doctor, "If he calls you, what would we say?" He said, "Well, don't bother. He will never talk." I don't know what to say, but don't bother. He will never talk. He will just go and use drugs. This was very devastating for me, actually. This is nonsense, and the patient, of course, will come back, relapse, and so on, and this is what I usually saw. So I started reading about it, reading about rehab and rehabilitation, and there was this matrix model of the California. It was very interesting for me, and I had some groups that fell into my hands, group work. So I decided, okay, addiction, group therapy, I will do it. And I started in the hospital through the night shifts and so to collect the patients, and okay guys, let's have a group. And I just sit there, I just listen to them talking. You know, addiction have its own language, its own vocabulary, okay? And if you don't know the vocabulary, you're always an alien to them. And I even don't smoke, so I didn't have any personal experience in addiction. So I didn't know anything about it. But when I started this meeting, I really got to grab the vocabulary, got to grab the feeling of it. Afterwards,
just jumping in there, Sherif, because this is the whole point of the Mind Science Institute in looking right around the world at people who are doing things, because certainly absolutely, you know, the dialogue of particular types. I mean, the same thing, there's addictive dialogue, there's traumatic dialogue, there's, you know, attachment dialogue, you know, where this is so true. And the fact that, again, you know, just speaking to your compassionate nature, that you've prepared, and I didn't mention it there, but I know that you actually listened to these people for nearly a year. Nearly 12 months, which was just such patience, and you know, I'm so impressed. But not only do you have the dialogue of addicted patients, but you have the dialogue of Egyptian addicted patients, which I know there was something you were talking about, the actual religious culture of the country was really relevant in the context of the way in which people related. You mentioned something the other day. We were talking about the 12-step program being a little bit difficult. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Afterwards, we started our own group with a friend of mine, with a colleague of mine, and we started to do some groups for the patients. And then one night we were talking about it and revising, like supervising each other, and we were talking. The patients always is not feeling what they read from the blue book and what they read from the 12 steps. Just for today, for example, meditation. And we thought we need to link it more with our culture. To give you a background here, the Just for the Day and the Blue Book is just a translation from the English version into an Arabic one. And we said we need something of our own, something to do with ourselves, so that the patient can really connect to. And we had another colleague of ours in the hospital. He was a little bit more religious than us. So we started talking with him and started training him in the group work and so on. At that time, we had about a year or a 2-year experience after the 1 year of listening. And we started to work with him and to guide him. And we had this idea of we don't need to give people, you pray and you don't pray and you pass and so on. No, we will give them some examples from the Prophet's life, some examples from Jesus' life, from Moses' life, from Joseph's life, and they just reflect what they see in their life and try to make it a model for them. And this really worked very well, because the patients have this in their background. When they were children, they used to go to the mosque to pray, they used to go with their families, and this only was very good in connecting with the patient. And also
no, I was just going to say that because the Muslim faith is a very storytelling based type of faith, isn't it?
Very much, very much, and a lot of stories of the people who were living with Prophet Muhammad and the people afterwards, and you know, like the priests and saints and so on in the Christianity. And you get these stories, and it is written, it's very well documented. Just people do not read, and it's not very easy to read actually at some time. But when you give them in the story way and give them how to reflect this in our life, it's very interesting, and it never ends. And it never ends. For example, the Joseph story, when you see it from this side and then you see it from this side, and the same event, you can get a lot of reflections about the addiction problem. And the patient can really see themselves in these stories and connect to them very, very well. And this was very interesting, and this was very different in our program that we did. It was a cognitive behavior program, and it was very different from the 12 steps, and this what made us very different even in our culture, in our country.
This is actually very, very Ericksonian as I listen to it. Milton Erickson, who's one of my favorites, and the Erickson Foundation, I speak there quite regularly.
Yeah.
This idea of giving people just story, I mean, Erickson was famous for saying something, and people say, saying a story, and people say, well, what does it mean? And he'd then say another story, and I'd say, well, what does that mean? And he'd give you another story, and then eventually he'd send you out on some task. So that's interesting. Yeah. So that cognitive behavioural sort of altering their thoughts process.
It's very interesting, and
sort of a more instructive type of fashion wasn't really working so well. But this idea of generating a flow.
Right. And talking about this type of therapy, it was very interesting to work with patients in some art therapy using, for example, origami art. Origami is the art of folding papers and so on. So I had this friend I met, and I started asking him to join us in some groups, and it was very effective with the patients. They do something. Addict patients always have this idea that they do not know how to accomplish anything. But then you give them a paper and they fold it, and in 5-10 minutes they get something. He is successful in doing something. Then he goes home and connects to the children of his family. For example, his own children, or even cousins and nephews and so on, and he gives them a game, gives them a play, just a piece of paper, and he folds it, and they are, and it's very nice and it's very fun. It was
it's
very
so simple. Albert Bandura. This is Albert Bandura's talked about this with self-efficacy, and to some extent, Decky and Ryan talk about this in some of their work that they do, talking about actualization and autonomy. Now, I do know, but independently, that psychodrama is also very good. But you did that as well. I mean, this is you know, with so little support. Tell me a bit about the psychodrama, because that was really quite something. Your access to the community is fantastic.
We had this several experiences with psychodrama. We have this writer. He is a professional writer here in Egypt, and he wrote some films and so on. And I ran into him, and we talked again, and he was excited again to help. So, and we had this problem with some patients that they do not know how to express themselves well, how to write anything about themselves. And he came and he just gave some workshops about writing, just writing, without any interference about addiction or treatment, just writing. And surprisingly, it gave very, very good effect with them in expressing themselves, in how to name the emotions, and how to write about it, and how to express it very well. It was very interesting. And then again, we had this director. He's a young one, doesn't have any big work yet, but he was also interested and came, and we did some psychodrama about how, you know, this trauma reenactment triangle, the abuser, the victim, and the bystander. And we teach them how to engulf this and to see how the ideas come. Okay, so we ask people through the writer to write a scenario about the idea, about some problems they made, and how they thought about it according to this triangle. And we got the director, and we acted the ideas in front of them. So the guy with the ideas just sit back, and a couple of his friends or 3 of his friends will act in front of him his idea. And this was very, very interesting. About they see how the abuser in my mind will drive me to use drugs, how the victim will be harmed by this, and how the bystander is fighting to stop me, and I cannot stop. It was really very interesting, and they take it as a play, but actually it gives them very good insight.
Oh, it's wonderful. It just sounds like fantastic work. Now, because, I mean, you really, though, as you built up these groups and did this work, it wasn't easy. I understand your first sort of group of patients that you actually worked with was only, you know, a few people, but they would travel great distances to find you and participate.
At that time, I didn't, and the start, when after the 1 year of listening, so I decided I'd start a group, and I had 3 patients, and these 3 patients were very loyal actually. They came to me in the different hospitals that I worked in. Here in Egypt, you don't work in one hospital, you have to move around a little bit to have some shifts at night just to increase the salary and increase the income. So they came to me at different hospitals. Some hospitals was 50 kilometers away from Alexandria, and they drove there, and we sit and had our groups, and then they got back to Alexandria, and I spent the night and go in the morning, and then we meet after 2 or 3 days, and so on. It was, I know, when you think about it now, it was not something very well organized, and if you revise it maybe in a scientific way, you would have a lot of criticism in it. But it was a start, and actually it was a start that affected not only me, it affected a lot of people in our country, in Alexandria at least. Before we started this work, the addiction work in our city, or most of Egypt, was limited to ex-addicts. I'm addict and now I'm treated, so I start treating other people and so on. This had a lot of problems and a lot of malpractices. But now other doctors are joining in, are trying to do the same, and we are doing some training programs for them and training programs for psychologists and so on to start people to build teams and to start the same idea again. And it's very interesting. I'm very, very proud that the idea is starting to spread around.
Oh, very good. I mean, certainly we've talked about it, but you know, we'll have to see what at the Mind Science Institute, what we can do to support or you know, give some kind of assistance. But we'll talk more about that as we go along. And I certainly at this point want to just interject and talk to those people who are watching this, that if any of you are sort of thinking, wow, I think there's some stuff I can contribute, or I know people in Egypt, or I'm interested in the Egyptian sort of process, please, the point of the Mind Science Institute and Mind Science TV is to connect people as well as for us to enjoy the experience. So I'm hoping that people will you know, email you, or they can do it through the Mind Science Institute, because that's probably the safest way. And I know something else as I'm listening to all this stuff, writing this stuff up, putting this into some sort of paper and then getting it into a publication somewhere, that's pretty difficult. I imagine you could do with some peers out there. I think it's not mentoring, it's peer mentoring, because you know, you guys are well educated, and you don't need to be shown how. You just need to be given some opportunities. So that's something I'm sure you need.
I would be very, very glad, of course, to have any suggestion about the program and any guidance. You name it, guidance, teaching, I don't mind at all. I just, we keep learning all the way. And of course, about mentoring, about publishing, this is very, very something that has been very stressing for me. You know, you do a lot of work, and it's not easy to know how to write about it, how to and sometimes like when we met in the conference, I sometimes talk to experts from all over the world about ideas, and they say, this is very interesting, why don't you write it down? And I go, okay, thank you. The idea is, I really have a problem in how to write it down. We have a lot of case records, for example, a lot of very strange cases. One day we had Dr. Anderson here in Egypt in one of our conferences, and I'm a very big fan of Symptoms of the Mind, his book. I was very glad to meet him, and I talked to him. This was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I talked to him about something like a theory that I have about interpersonal relations. And he said, this is very good work. You have to write it down, but don't only write it down in a paper, write it down in a book. This something deserves to be in a book.
It's very hard, I know.
And till now.
Yeah, because I've had that, and I've got a couple of books that are on the you know, there's bits of paper. I've got hundreds of bits of paper, but someone said to me once with even the book I wrote for the general public, you know, how the real world is driving us crazy. They said, oh, and when did you write the book? And I said, well, I had nothing else to do that decade. It's just not that easy. But there is ways to start, and you know, I'm certainly going to see what I can do, and I'm hoping others listen to this. But just a little bit on that, on the actual ideas and techniques. Certainly, you've talked a little bit about this storytelling and giving people experiences. I want to ask you a bit about what I've actually written down here, the field of orbits. But we'll do that in a second. You may even do a drawing and hold it up. But there was the wonderful couple that you were working with, and you were very Ericksonian, and I think this is just something that people might like to hear. The treatment that you gave this young couple, and you gave the gentleman, you told him basically to go home and buy a product. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
Yeah, okay. I had this patient. He was a recovering addict. He had about 1.5 years or so, and his wife was pregnant at that time, and she was the pregnancy and hormones and so on, and he came very angry to the group, and she's doing so, and I don't know what to do, and so I told him, do you know how to play chess? He said yes. I told him, does your wife know how to play chess? He said, I think so. I told him, okay, please go and buy a chess while going home and use it. And he came a couple of days later, very excited. Yes, the chess worked. It is very interesting. And I called him and said, yes, it's very, very nice. Please, while you're going home today after the group,
Just lost you
please just get the thing that the baby, yeah, the baby put in the, and his wife, yeah, very, very nice. How thankful of you. You're very passionate. The thing about the baby now and so on. And he called me. He said, "This is magic. I just got something for very, very cheap things, and it worked very well." And this,
yes,
this other guy.
Oh yeah, I'm just going to say, Sherif, that's called a pacifier. Isn't that great? You told him to take home, but isn't that a lovely metaphor? You got them to put between them a pacifier, and because they were arguing so much. That's really lovely.
Yeah.
Now please, another story, please.
Yeah, another story. I have this patient now in recovery, and he has a problem with self-control, with a lot of control, and that I need to control everything in my life. I need everything to be, like obsessive trait personality. And I told him, okay, you know how to fold the paper into a boat, origami again? He said, yes, we have a swimming pool in the place. So I told him, okay, let's fold the paper, and I want you to swim it to make it float on in the pool. So he made a small boat, and he put it in the pool, and of course the paper dissolved in the water, and it drowned. I told him, okay, your homework is to make a boat and to make it float in the pool. And I came on the other day, and what he did is he found cartoon paper, and he made a boat with a cartoon paper. So okay, great. Now I want you to write down the relation between the boat, the water, the wind, and everything. He said, what? Why would I do this? I told him, this is your therapy. You will never have a vacation except you finish this. And he started working with this, and I came 2 days later. I found him. He made a bigger boat. He made he had some nylon paper and put it all around the boat so that no water can enter. And they said the guy is always sitting in front of the pool and very watching the boat and so on. So I told him, now I want you to know how to make the boat move in the water with in the way that you want. For example, the direction that you want. He said, this is impossible. Okay, would you like to? He's an engineer. Would you like to have a motor? He said, whatever motor I get, the wind. We are now in the winter here in Egypt, and he said the wind and the water will never affect. I said, great. Now, imagine that the boat is you. You can never, how much the engine is strong, you can never neglect the effect of the wind and the effect of the water. We can never, how much we are strong, we can never neglect the effect of the community. We can never neglect the effect of others on us, right? He said, yes. And I told him, although the boat sometimes has some water in it, but it still floats. Although we can have some problems in ourselves, but we can still survive. And he said, yes. And I told him, okay, a couple of days ago, the wind blew and the boat drowned at night. Okay, it drowned the boat. And then he woke up and he was very angry and sad. So I went in the morning and saw him, and he said the boat drowned. I told him, okay, but this will teach us how to separate ourselves from what we do from our hands. If we do something, it doesn't mean that this is ourselves. It's just what we make of our hands. and we can do it again, and we can do something better, and so on. So we have to separate our identity from what we make and do. Until now, we're working on this both thing for about a month now, and whenever he say, everybody in the group is working other things individually, but this guy, he is the both guy. And we are working all his program through himself and the both relationship. This guy, we're still working on it, but I hope it will work out.
Certainly in things like interpersonal neurobiology, which you know I'm involved in, and this sort of somatic therapy. I mean, getting this felt sense of your own experience by externalizing it so that you can do it. Again, very Ericksonian, very utilizing, and it's just fascinating to hear you talk about all the different types of aspects that you were able to bring out of that. You were able to, it was one experience, the building of the boat, but it wasn't just about one thing. It was about his personal life, it was about his controls, it was also about letting go of his controls, and so very, very elegant. And I think it's a great example of some of the frustrations that we have with cognitive type of therapies, just straight cognitive therapies, because that's really a cognitive therapy, but it's a cognitive therapy through a felt, embodied, and as we say in interpersonal neurobiology, a right-brained engagement. So he was able to engage, and that's where engagement is. Yeah.
And it's more interesting for them to join in such activities, and in an indirect way, it's like play therapy and so on.
Now, just quickly, because we've got a few things to get through before, we unfortunately can't talk forever. Sorry about that, Sherif. Just this field of these orbits, this field of orbits, you also had a lovely pictorial representation, which was kind of something I know you were working with interpersonal psychotherapy, which didn't really satisfy, and it's not one of my, doesn't really cover everything for me either. But you were looking at a way of showing people just a visual representation of the way in which their relationships shift and move, and you just had this orbiting idea. I'd love you to describe that.
I got this drawing to maybe make it easier. You know, in the interpersonal relationships, there is this drawing circle thing, and you are in the middle, and you just organize the people around you and the people in relationship with you through the circle, the nearer, the little bit further, and so on. And you just try to describe the relation between you and them and how they move from one circle to another. But sometimes this is not very dynamic, I think. And so I thought about it in an orbital way. Why don't we change the circles into orbits? Okay. And if you are in the middle and the persons are revolving the orbit, sometimes they are very close, and in the same orbit sometimes they are a little bit further from you. And I don't know if you can see this. Can see it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. If you look on the green orbit, the smaller one, I draw two dots, one very near and one in the far end of the orbit. And on the violet orbit, you can see two dots again, one very near and one in the further end of the orbit. Okay. Usually, the persons on the violet orbit will be further than the persons on the green orbit, right? But sometimes, at some moment, the dot on the violet orbit will be nearer to the center than the one on the green orbit. Why would this matter? Because, again, it's a little bit culture thing. We have here the family and the nuclear family and so on. But because of life and because of hard living, sometimes you find yourself away from your brother, away from your parents and so on. And you think, okay, my friends or my colleagues may be nearer to me than them. Maybe are giving me more support. Yes, this may be right at this moment. But on a whole holistic view, more holistic view and a longitudinal view, no, your family is always near to you. And when you find a friend, for example, is now away from you, this doesn't mean that they are away, that you lost them. They are just in the orbit, in the far part of the orbit, and now they are getting close to you some way or another. When they think of this, it reduces anxiety very much, and they give them a lot of perspective. And sometimes we talk about even the energy between you and the person in the orbit. The closer the person, the more the energy that transfers and the affection between you and him. So, you know, for example, people here, they come and I saw this on the TV happening in, for example, in Palestine, and people here are very affected for what's happening there. And I'm very affected, I'm very depressed and so on. I saw the earthquake in Japan, and now I'm very, very affected, and I spend the night crying and so on. And I told them, okay, but these guys are very far in the orbit. If we are affected the same way from the people, that we will lose our energy, we will lose our good intentions and good energy all around. And when we search for something for ourselves, we will not get it, we will not have it.
I love it. I love it. It's beautiful, the orbit. Now, we'll have to tickle along a little bit. I mean, we've now sort of really got through and talked about all that background and those beautiful examples. And I mean, there's if anybody wants to know what's a take-home message, there we go, the field of orbits, Sherif, Darwish, brilliant. Something that we really have to discuss a little bit, but I want to do it from the point of view of the addiction people that you have and they're dealing with, and that's of course the revolution that has occurred all too recently. I mean, you know, and I just sort of declare that my daughter is a journalist, and she's been deeply involved in the Middle Eastern issues, and so it's something very close to my experience. In fact, she's now living in Cairo, so it's quite Daddy's comfortable. Well, Daddy's a lot happier that she's got friends like you nearby when needs be. But the revolution brought issues for you, and it really has had it has to have had an effect on the population. And
Right.
I think what one would assume is that it would have this very devastating effect, and I'm sure there's much of that. But really, the story from your recovery clinic group is a little bit more uplifting. Please share some of that.
You know, in the very first days of the revolution, especially in the very first 18 days, we had no police. And so the people, the police in the third day of the revolution, they left the streets, and the army went down in the streets. But the problem is, the army is not involved in drug dealing problems and so on. It's not their work. And because we don't have a police, so people make some checking points, some civil checking points all over the streets. Every collection of buildings will come down in the streets and make checkpoints in front of their building and their street, so that they protect from thieves and protect from people that escaped from the prisons and so on. And the problem is, we have a heavy drug problem in Egypt, and what happened is, because there is no police and people started to use drugs in these checking points, the youth that they use drugs, they use it very publicly. Okay, there's nobody to say what you're doing, and so they use it very publicly, and everything, the prices of everything went up at that time except the drugs. Only drugs prices went down, and people were giving them others something like tramadol and hashish and so on, just to stay awake, to have some fun while we're standing, while we're sitting here, and we have these patients. Of course, the rule in addiction is that you have to get away from any place that has drugs or any people that use drugs. You have to avoid them. And the problem is our patients were in the street, we're protecting their families, we're protecting their belongings, and they have to stand in these checking points. And we expected a lot of relapses actually, but what happened is no one of them relapsed.
No one.
We were seeing them in the morning for checking up on them and so on, day after day or something, but they had all the night, and I'm saying really all the night from 5 p.m. till the next day. Yes, it's very, very long time. And 0% of them relapsed. Really, 0% of them relapsed. And I noticed this, but I didn't talk about it. But after about some months, we opened this in the group. I asked them, why didn't you take drugs? What happened? And most of them, the answer was, we felt that it is not a very good time to relapse. There was something bigger than us that we have to stand for, and it's not a very good time to relapse. If we relapse, we will not have ourselves, we will not have our minds well, and for our families, for ourselves, and so on. We felt that we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to stand up for our country, and so on. It was amazing. So really, it was a very interesting idea. Maybe some people relapsed afterwards, but at the time, at the 18 days, or at the first month even, that there was no police there, and they had to stand in the street, no one of them relapsed.
I think
we talk about 40, 50 persons. We were not talking about small numbers.
Yes, 40 or 50. I mean, this is a huge message, and I think it's not anything that I think people are philosophically surprised about. I mean, it's having this sense that there is more to the world than you, and in fact, very often drug taking and addiction is that attempt to escape that pervasive horror that is yourself. But of course, it's quite, I'm sure you would say that some people took drugs during that time to escape the revolution. So there's difficulties there. But these were people who had recovered and stayed recovered for something more important. And it really brings us, our questioning of that aspect when we talk to addicts of how to get them to feel as though they are a part of something more. Because, of course, so many addicts and people who get to that stage of addiction have been so rejected and so pushed away and so isolated. So it's a multi-layered issue. And please, can we not have to have a revolution, an actual national revolution, in order for people to get this feeling of connection back,
Yeah. Actually, the revolution in our country, especially at the time of the revolution, it changed a lot in the psychology of the people, on the connectedness of the people. I myself, I had a lot of people living in the same building, and I didn't know them, but standing in the streets with them, sharing long nights with them, and we having these long talks. We have a much more social life, and I get to stay at home more, and I get to know my family even more. It was
very important.
It was a very strange experience, actually.
It's sort of like
it was a very strange experience.
Let's cut out the middleman and actually be nice to each other without waiting for horror to be our enemy. I mean, we always see this in the movies. We wait till there's the aliens coming before we actually unite as a species, across the way. And I actually just wrote a little piece in conjunction with the piece that my daughter wrote for the Global Mail, which she writes for, just saying that how we have forgotten not only the nature of interacting with people, but the nature of interacting with peoples. And it's possible for us to say, oh, well, those whoever's, this blocking out and avoiding that color or that race or that religion, and let's cut out the middleman. And that's part of the work of interpersonal neurobiology, and certainly the message that the Mind Science Institute spreads. When you connect and engage, your immune system improves. Your sense of relating, your right brain interaction with the left brain, the capacity to love, the capacity to be loved, they all lift. We should do that more often.
You know, Richard, the message that I want to say here is maybe we don't have all these fantastic devices that you can see through the neuroscience, and you can see through what happens really in the brain and what happens in the neurochemistry and genetics of the brain. But you can use with very little resources, with very simple resources, a piece of paper, with just with a song or a play or something, what you have read through the Western world, advances and the PET scans and so on, and put it into practice. Put it into practice. It's not a hard thing to do. We just need to have some guts, and we just need to have some ideas and put it into practice. Use science and put it in a simple way to the patient.
And that's the theme of the Mind Science Institute, translating and transforming knowledge into practice. And you've just described so many things, not only your experience, which I think is really interesting to people to hear a bit about Egypt, but also as a therapist, you've given us some steps. We're probably going to have to wind up fairly soon. I'm just looking down at some of my notes. I think, there's so much stuff we've covered, but maybe just, I think in the last few minutes, maybe if you could talk a little bit about your aspirations. I know you've started some training and some programs there. Maybe there's some aspirations you could speak to, and hopefully they'll fall on some ears that might seek to be involved and engage with that as well.
We started this training program about for our colleagues here to start the same idea, and what I was thinking about is, sometimes I have these patients, Egyptian American patients, and they came here and they told me the problem is that we don't have enough insurance in the US to cover our treatment, and we have to get out of the inpatient programs and out of the rehab facilities because they are not covered with insurance. And I met some people in some conferences in the US, and they said that for one day it's $1,000 per day. It's $30,000 per day for treatment.
I'll just
jump
in there because the internet fell out. You just said, so $1,000 per day.
Per day, yes. It is a very fancy facility, but let's say the other ones are 1/3 are 10,000, for example, per month. Okay. For us here in Egypt, this is a huge number, a huge amount. Our facility is the most expensive here in Alexandria, and we take about $1,500 per month. Okay, and we are the most expensive.
Per month?
Yeah, per month. And I was thinking, why don't we try to have this connection, as a mind science idea is to have this international connection, to get patients from the US, to get patients from all around the world to be treated here. Maybe you need accreditation, and you need more training, or we need more training and accreditation according to the point of view of for example, the US practice. Okay, we can take we can take a team to the US and train them for a year or so, and then get them back, place them here, and run a facility here in Egypt with locals. It's just like the Chinese factories, Nokia now, Sony, whatever factory is opening in China because of locals, right? So why don't we do this in medicine? You can do the same, especially in psychiatry. You don't need all of these stuff and all of these facilities and instruments, and so you just need a doctor, you just need a psychologist, you just need a counselor. And why don't we train some teams and then reinstate them here in Egypt, and you can treat people from all around the world. At least let's say people are from the same cultural background. because this is very important. The culture of the patient is very important. The background of the patient and the religion of the patient is very important in his treatment. I've seen this with these couple of guys. They have this problem that when they are in the US, they mingle with the Egyptian society there, and they feel they're Egyptians in the US. And when they are in Egypt, they feel they are Americans in Egypt. And they mingle with the American citizens here living in Egypt and so on. And they have this identity problem, very, very strong identity problem. And actually, it causes a lot of relapses. And when we solve this identity problem, it had a much better effect on them. So why don't we think a little bit out of the box?
It's
a
lovely.
little bit out of the box.
Yeah. Sorry, I know you're a little bit out of the box. Sorry, the connections here is jumping around. But, you know, who's listening out there who's got connections with the UN? Who's listening who's got some clinics in America that perhaps have the capacities to do scholarships? This is interesting. This is interesting. I wonder if you speaking this idea, and hopefully we've got a lot of people listening around the world, see what we can generate from just this call. But otherwise, we'll do. There's a lot more going on. Sherif, I'm going to sort of bring things to a bit of a close now, which is very sad because you know, there's so much more to talk to you about, and you know, I'm sure we'll have some seminars later on and things that where people can come in and we can go in a bit more depth about some stuff. But I just want to thank you, and as a representative of everyone listening, just thank you for being here today. But thank you for being in Egypt and doing all this wonderful work with addicts who just, it sounds like they really wouldn't have that service if it were not for you and some of your you know, supportive colleagues.
I have a wonderful team here, and we work very well together and very comfortably together, and we take care of each other very well. And thank you very, very much for this chance and for giving me the chance to talk in mind science and to just share some ideas. And I hope I will get some context to learn from and to use them in my practice. And thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Now, we'll just take a second or two to close the recording off, but thank you, and thank you from everybody, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. Wonderful. Thanks, Sherif. Bye.